It was just supposed to be another quiet Saturday. I stopped by my parents' house like I always did, a habit formed over years of obligation dressed as routine. Salem had the kind of crisp air that hinted at autumn even in early spring. The front door creaked the same way it always had, and my mother's orchids peeked from the backyard windowsill like silent spectators. "Can you take a look at this for me?" Mom handed me a pile of paperwork before slipping on her gardening gloves and disappearing into the sunlight. The stack was a mess: utility bills, insurance slips, scribbled notes in her neat cursive. I sat at the dining table, the same table where I'd helped them plan out budgets, refinance the mortgage, and set up automatic payments that quietly drained my account each month. That's when I saw it: a thick, cream-colored envelope tucked between the electricity bill and a coupon flyer. It was labeled in bold serif, "Estate Plan and Will." I hesitated, not because I didn't recognize it, but because I did. My chest tightened. I told myself I was just checking to make sure everything was in order. That's what I always did, right? Keep things together. Make sure nothing fell apart. My fingers unfolded the pages. Legal language, sharp and cold. Then, I reached the section titled Distribution of Assets. My eyes scanned down, faster now. The house, the SUV, the retirement account, the savings, even Mom's wedding ring, all to Samantha. I kept reading, hoping maybe I'd missed something. A clause, a footnote, a line acknowledging me. Nothing except one sentence, printed with all the warmth of a medical bill. "We love both our daughters." That's all I got. My hands began to tremble, the page crinkling at the edges as I gripped it tighter. 10 years, $60,000, late nights, broken pipes, 2 jobs, 3 missed vacations, all of it wiped clean with a signature and a lawyer's stamp. The silence in that house suddenly felt suffocating. The tick of the hallway clock, the distant sound of a lawnmower, my breath catching in my throat. I hadn't cried yet, but something inside me had just shifted. Something deep. And it wasn't sadness, it was clarity. I used to tell myself it was just temporary, that working double shifts and skipping dinners with friends was a small price to pay for family, that putting my own dreams on hold was what good daughters did. It started with small things, covering a utility bill here, helping with groceries there. Then came the month Dad lost his contract job and the mortgage fell behind. That's when I offered to cover it, just until things get better. They never really did. 10 years blurred into one long act of holding everything together, at high. Clock out of my main job at 5, scarf down leftovers in the break room, and head straight to my second shift at the diner 3 nights a week. My weekends? They belonged to leaky sinks, chipped tiles, broken water heaters. I became the unofficial handyman, the financial safety net, and the emotional shock absorber, all without a title and definitely without thanks. My parents never asked where the money came from, they just learned to expect it. My name was never on the deed, but every nail hammered into those walls had my fingerprints on it. Every winter, I made sure the roof didn't cave in. Every summer, I fixed the AC so Mom's orchids wouldn't wilt. Samantha, on the other hand, floated through life like rules didn't apply. Job after job, apartment after apartment, always a new crisis. She was the kind of person who forgot passwords and birthdays and rent dates. And somehow, every time, I was the one patching things up behind her. "She's still figuring it out," Dad would say, like that excused her from responsibility. Like I hadn't been figuring things out since I was 19. It wasn't that I resented them. Not at first. I just kept hoping one day they'd look at me and see more than convenience. That they'd notice the hours, the effort, the quiet way I kept us all from falling apart. But maybe they did notice, and decided. It was easier to pretend they didn't. She came back inside just as I was staring at the final page. Her footsteps were light, like she was just returning from watering the orchids. "Hannah, did you find the statement?" she asked, already halfway through the kitchen. I stood up, the will trembling in my hand. "Is this real?" My voice was steady, unnervingly so, like something inside me had snapped tight enough to stop the shaking. She froze, turned slowly, and her eyes locked on the folder in my grip. "Oh, that," she said, brushing her hands off on a dish towel. "It's not what you think." I tilted my head. "It says everything goes to Samantha." She hesitated, then smiled like it might soften the blow. "Well, she's still figuring things out. We thought it would give her some stability." "And what about me?" I asked. "What do I get? Besides the mortgage payments, the repairs, the late-night pharmacy runs, the winters on that ladder fixing your gutters?" She moved toward me, placing a hand over mine. "Don't overthink it. We love you both." I pulled away, slow and cold. "No, Mom. You loved what I could do. You loved not having to worry because I was always the one catching everything." The kitchen door creaked open again. Dad stepped in, sipping his coffee like it was just another afternoon. "You don't need to react like this, Hannah. You're doing fine. Samantha, she needs more support." I let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "She's 30. She hasn't paid her own phone bill in years." He sighed, as if the drama inconvenienced him. "You've always been stronger." I nodded slightly. "Stronger. So you thought I didn't need anything? Not even recognition?" They both said nothing. Just silence, like maybe if they didn't speak, it wouldn't count. I placed the will gently on the table, like laying down a white flag-turned gravestone. "Thanks for showing me where I stand." Then I turned and walked out of the house, my house, in every way but name, and no one followed. No apology, no questions. Just the sound of a door closing behind me, and a chill that clung to my ribs long after I left. The days that followed felt disjointed, like I was walking through a version of my life that didn't quite fit anymore. I still went to work, still folded laundry, still watered the plant in the kitchen window, but every movement felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume on everything familiar. They didn't call, not to talk, not to explain. But 4 days later, a message from Dad lit up my phone. "Hannah, this month's mortgage is due. Can you transfer it soon? Deadline's Friday." No mention of the will, no apology, not even a question about how I was, just the expectation, dressed as a casual reminder. I stared at the screen for a long time, the same way I used to stare, at the ceiling some nights, wondering how much longer I could keep doing everything and still feel like I mattered. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed, each word as sharp as chipped glass. "I think Samantha can handle it. That house is hers now, right?" I hit send. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mom. "Hannah, don't do this. We need to talk." I didn't answer. I didn't even feel angry. Just emptied out. Like a drawer that had been pulled too many times and finally came off the rails. That night, I turned off the auto pay from my bank account to theirs. I clicked cancel and felt something shift deep in my chest. A release, a first breath after years of holding it. They thought I would always come through. That no matter what, I'd keep showing up with open hands and closed questions. But something had broken clean inside me. And it wasn't my heart this time. It was the pattern, and I had no interest in picking up the pieces. The silence stretched, out like winter fog, thick, still, and refusing to lift. Not a single call, no apology, not even a shallow attempt to pretend things were fine. Just a void where family used to be, and in that quiet, I saw things clearer than ever before. For years, I'd been the default daughter, the one who remembered doctor's appointments, who drove through storms to drop off prescriptions, who signed co-loans and repaired dishwashers without being asked. My love had been practical, measured in paid bills, warm meals, and a roof that didn't leak because I was the one who kept it from doing so. Now, without me, the cracks were showing. Mrs. Lorraine from next door called one afternoon, not to gossip, but with concern in her voice. "Your parents' porch light's been off for a week. Thought maybe they were out of town. But the trash hasn't been brought in either." I checked the electric company's online portal out of reflex. The account was overdue. A red notice. Blinked at me like an accusation. Past due. Pending shutoff. My name was still on the contact list. That night, I opened my banking app and went through every joint account one by one. Mortgage autopay, disabled, water, electric, gas, canceled. I even removed the emergency backup card I'd once linked to their pharmacy account. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just moved through each step with a quiet certainty, like closing drawers in a house I no longer lived in. Then, I opened my reminders app. Line after line, pay mortgage, refill mom's meds, check water bill. I deleted them one by one. Not quickly, but deliberately, like a small ceremony. Like finally giving myself permission to stop being responsible for everyone else's chaos. When the last reminder vanished, I sat in the stillness of my apartment, bathed in the soft yellow light from the lamp by the couch. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. A hollow, sacred kind of space where I could finally start to breathe my own air. And this time, no one was waiting to exhale on my behalf. The first message came late at night, a time when people think guilt lands easier. Samantha's name lit up my phone. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. You're seriously being selfish. Mom and Dad didn't mean it like that. You've always been independent. I'm just not. You know that. I stared at the screen, the words twisting in that familiar way she always used. Soft guilt wrapped in helplessness. I replied without delay. Then prove you deserve what you've been given. Start by paying the mortgage. No response. A week passed, and then the house started talking louder than she ever could. Lorraine mentioned the porch light was still out. Another neighbor said the mailbox was overflowing. The bank notices must have started coming because the next message was shorter, clipped. Power's about to be shut off. Are you really going to let that happen to our family? This time I didn't type back immediately. I let the silence sit for a while, then answered in a sentence so simple it almost felt cruel. I'm not letting anything happen. I'm letting people take responsibility for their own choices. Reality, I imagine, started cracking beneath her then. She hadn't expected me to hold my ground. Not the girl who once showed up at her apartment with soup when she had the flu. Not the sister who'd bailed her out of 5 late rent notices without a word. But now she was holding the deed and the burden that came with it. And the house, like all unkept things, had begun to shift. Mold in the basement, a leaky faucet left dripping. A missed mortgage deadline that wasn't covered by me this time. Samantha, who had signed her name like it meant nothing, was learning the weight of ink on paper. And I, who had carried them for years, felt something anchored deeper inside me. I wasn't saving them anymore. I was saving myself. I saw the van before I saw them. That silver minivan, familiar as the back of my own hand, sat parked crookedly, near the gate to my building as if they'd pulled in without thinking, without planning, just reacting. I stepped out of my car slowly. There they were, all 3 of them, standing beneath the concrete awning like shadows from a former life. Mom clutched her purse tightly, her mouth pinched. Dad looked older than I remembered, hunched, in a windbreaker he never used to wear. Samantha stood behind them, eyes darting, wringing her hands like she always did when she wanted something but didn't know how to ask. I said nothing. Just walked until I stood 10 feet away, arms folded. My silence made them shift on their feet. Hannah, Mom said, voice trembling. We didn't want to do this, but the bank's coming next week. They're reassessing the property. We're out of time. Dad stepped forward, gaze low. We made a mistake, he said, quieter than I'd ever heard him. But if the house goes, your mother won't be able to handle it. I looked at him, level and unmoved. Then why did you decide I wasn't worth including when you wrote the will? His eyes dropped to the sidewalk. His fingers worked the edge of his coat. Back then, we thought, you'd be fine. You've always been strong. But Samantha gets to fail and inherit everything, I said, turning to face her. She gets forgiven by default. Samantha's lips parted, but nothing came out. Just the shape of excuses that never formed. I let the silence hang there. Cold, sharp, unblinking. I gave you everything, I said. Not with conditions, but with trust. And what I got back was a message. Hannah will handle it. Hannah doesn't need to be seen. Tears slipped down Mom's face. We didn't know it would come to this. Can't you help just a little? Just until... No, I said softly. Not because I can't, but because if I do, nothing will change. Samantha stepped forward, voice cracking. I didn't think it would get so complicated. I did, I said. I just hoped you'd prove me wrong. Then I stepped past them, unlocked my door, and turned once more. If you truly want to grow up, this is your chance. I shut the door, and the wind swallowed their footsteps behind me. It started quietly, just a ping from Olivia during my lunch break. Hey, are you on Facebook? You should check your mom's page. She's posting some unbelievable stuff. I hadn't logged in for months. Still, I typed her name into the search bar with a strange weight in my chest. There it was. A picture of the house I'd held together for years, now faded and slightly crooked, with a caption that felt like a knife beneath my ribs. It's heartbreaking when your own daughter turns her back on family, abandoning sick, aging parents, in their time of need. After all, we sacrificed for her. 82 shares. Dozens of comments. Sympathy. Condemnation. Strangers calling me ungrateful. A friend from high school posted a sad emoji. One of Samantha's college roommates chimed in with a vague platitude about entitled kids these days. Then came Dad's post, different photo, same narrative. We thought Hannah was strong, family-oriented, but when we needed her, she disappeared. And Samantha, of course, couldn't resist. Her caption dripped with sarcasm. Some people are only kind when they're on top. When you ask them to step down and help, silence. But hey, strength, right? I stared at the screen, not angry. Just exhausted. When guilt stopped working, they reached for shame, but they forgot. This time, I wasn't silent. I opened my profile and wrote a single post. No background, no emojis, just the truth. My family is sharing a one-sided story. To be fair, here's mine. I attached a photo of the will with Samantha's name circled. Screenshots of mortgage payments in my name, a snapshot of Mom's $2,900 money request, and finally, the last text I ever sent. I'm not responsible for this anymore. The post didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Within minutes, the narrative began to shift. A childhood neighbor messaged me, stunned. A former coworker commented, "You've always been the glue. Don't let them rewrite your story." 2 days later, the posts were gone. My parents' pages wiped clean. Samantha changed her profile picture to a black and white flower, her usual signal when things slipped out of her control. I didn't respond again. I didn't need to. The truth had finally spoken. After the storm of posts and whispered blame faded, into digital dust the silence returned, but this time it didn't carry the sting of abandonment. It felt different. Still. Unthreatening. Like a field after harvest, cleared of everything but the soil. No new messages, no calls, no knocks on my door. Samantha vanished from my inbox entirely. Maybe she was hoping I'd break first. Maybe she just didn't know what to say now that everyone could see the truth. I didn't wait. I started living in a way I never had before. I enrolled in an art class at the community center, a beginner's photography course with $10 coffee and a room that smelled faintly of sawdust and linseed oil. The first time I held the borrowed DSLR in my hands, something clicked, literally and metaphorically. I spent afternoons walking through old neighborhoods and forgotten alleys, chasing light through puddles and reflections in cracked windows. One photo, a black and white capture of a blooming rose against a rusted fence, sold for $20 at a local market. I held that bill like it was proof of something no one had ever given me: permission. At home, I baked again. Real baking, flour dusted, counters, chocolate-smeared spatulas, music humming low in the background. I bought a pair of soft green shoes just because they made me smile. Not practical, not necessary. Just mine. The plant in the kitchen window, a struggling peace lily I'd almost given up on, bloomed with 2 delicate white flowers. I took a picture of it in the morning light and smiled to myself. It wasn't that I didn't think about them. I did. But the thoughts no longer ached. They passed through like clouds, sometimes heavy, sometimes light, but never enough to drown me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I had stopped needing to be right. I had simply chosen to be free. It came in. A blue envelope, the kind my mother always used for birthdays and doctor appointment reminders. My name written in familiar cursive, a little shaky, like her hands had hesitated. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at it for a long time before I slid my finger beneath the flap and pulled the letter free. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and something older, something like dust and memory. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Hannah, I don't know how else to reach you. Your father isn't as strong as he used to be. The house is too much. The bills, the calls, I don't know where to begin. I've had sleepless nights wondering how we got here, wondering if it's too late. I never meant for you to feel forgotten. I only wanted to give your sister a chance to grow. But maybe I chose the wrong kind of fairness. If you're willing, I'm still here. No anger, no blame, just a kind of quiet reaching. I sat with the letter in my lap, my fingers pressed to the creases. I read it again, slower. This wasn't a manipulative plea. Not this time. It was the kind of apology that didn't beg for forgiveness. It just asked to be heard. But even then, I knew the answer. I didn't tear the letter. I didn't throw it away. I folded it gently, along its original lines, and placed it in the drawer beneath my desk. Next to undeveloped film, scribbled poems, and old postcards I never sent. Things that once meant something, but no longer held urgency. It wasn't rejection. It was a kind of peace. A quiet knowing that some things, some people, some wounds, aren't ours to fix. For so long, I thought choosing myself would feel selfish. But sitting there in my soft, worn sweater, bare feet on the cool floor, the house warm with the scent of rising bread, I didn't feel selfish at all. I felt whole. I had given what I could, and now I was giving myself the rest. It showed up on a real estate listing one crisp Thursday morning, 218 Elm Street, my parents' house, now a public plea for rescue. I stared at the familiar porch in the grainy photo, its chipped paint curling like dry leaves. The caption read, "Fixer-upper with potential. Motivated sellers. Price recently reduced. No offers." I walked by a few days later on my way back from the art center. The sidewalk was cracked, the lawn overgrown. A for sale sign tilted in the wind like it wasn't sure it still had the strength to stand. The front window, the one I'd once repaired after a storm, had dust gathering in the corners. The place looked tired. Not haunted, just worn out. Like it had been propped up too long by invisible hands that had finally let go. I raised my camera, not out of nostalgia, but to document a moment I never thought I'd witness with peace in my chest. The shutter clicked softly as I framed it just right, house-centered, vines climbing the right pillar, sky a pale gray behind it. A story held in a single image. It had always been just a house. I was the one who made it a home. The one who patched, painted, paid, and protected. And now, in its silence, I could see the truth. My presence had masked a deeper neglect. Without the scaffolding I provided, it couldn't stand. Not just structurally, emotionally. That wasn't my failure. It was my freedom. I stepped back, slipped the camera strap around my neck, and walked away without looking over my shoulder. The image would be enough. Not a goodbye. Just a closing chapter pressed between the pages of everything I'd survived, and as the wind moved through the bare trees, rustling dry leaves across the pavement, I felt something I hadn't in years. Weightless. Not from losing something, but from finally putting it down. The blog post was something I wrote late one night, half-finished tea cooling beside my keyboard, rain tapping gently against the window. I hadn't planned to share it. It started as a journal entry, a place to put the truth without softening it for anyone's comfort. I wrote about the unpaid labor of being the strong one, about the emotional erosion of being needed but never considered. I added snapshots, images, I'd taken during my quiet reclamation, the cracked porch, the blooming peace lily, the empty photo frame on my shelf. Then I hit publish. By morning, my inbox was full. Not hate, not pity, just connection. Dozens, then hundreds of messages from people who'd been where I was, sons, daughters, siblings, spouses, people who'd given everything and been written out of the story the second they stopped giving. One comment stuck with me. You didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us who stayed silent too long. I wasn't just Hannah who used to fix things anymore. I was a photographer, a writer, a mentor at the art center where kids looked at the world through a lens and saw possibility instead of pressure. I had become something more than what they left me out of, and I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I had simply chosen to walk away. Not to hurt them, not to make a statement, not to punish. I walked away to heal me.